Welcome to this explainer. The story of Earth doesn't actually kick off with green continents and endless blue oceans. It starts way, way back, about 4.6 billion years ago, in a totally chaotic, honestly kind of unremarkable, dust-filled neighborhood of the Milky Way. Today, we're zooming way in to witness the ultimate transformation. We're going to see how a spinning, lifeless cloud of gas somehow managed to engineer the living, breathing planet that we call home. Which brings us to the absolutely massive question we're tackling today. How exactly did scattered, random interstellar debris assemble itself into the complex cells that make up literally all living things, including us? How do you actually get from dead rocks, gas, and water to living, dividing cells? It's easily one of science's greatest mysteries. To wrap our heads around how we got here, we really need to break down the timeline of how simple chemistry graduated into complex biology.
All right, let's dive right into part one, the solar nebula. So before the Earth even existed, our little cosmic neighborhood was nothing more than this solar nebula. Just a massive, rotating cloud, made up mostly of hydrogen and helium gas, plus some scattered interstellar dust. And it just sat there, totally undisturbed, until about 4.6 billion years ago. That's when a nearby event, we're talking likely a massive supernova, sent these incredibly powerful shockwaves rippling right through the cloud. This gigantic burst of energy provided the exact gravitational kick needed to throw everything off balance, causing the entire massive cloud to violently collapse inward under its own immense gravity.
As that giant dust cloud collapsed in on itself, it started to spin wildly, flattening out into a massive disk. Picture, a ball of dough being tossed and spun into a giant pizza crust. The center of this spinning disk got so densely packed and unbelievably hot that nuclear fusion finally ignited. And boom, in that brilliant flash of ignition, our sun was born.
Moving right along to part two, forging the early Earth.
So Earth was actually built from the solar leftovers through this wildly chaotic process we call accretion. Out in the protoplanetary disk swirling around the brand new sun, tiny grains of dust and ice were just constantly crashing into each other, literally sticking together through static electricity. Over millions of years, these little clumps snowballed into planetanimals. These were massive rocks, kilometers wide, with enough gravity to just aggressively sweep up even more debris. Over this frenzied cosmic window of just 10 to 20 million years, these crashing rocks merged and accumulated to form the early Earth, before eventually going through a crucial internal settling process known as differentiation. Now, early Earth didn't look anything like the tranquil blue marble we know today. It was a violent, chaotic, molten ball of magma, getting constantly pummeled by asteroid bombardments and intense radioactive decay. Just an absolute hellscape. But as the planet finally started to cool down, that differentiation process occurred. The denser materials like iron and nickel actually sank all the way down to the center to form the Earth's core. Meanwhile, the lighter silicate rocks kind of floated on top, forming the mantle and the crust. And here's the thing, this sinking of iron wasn't just some neat geological settling. It was absolutely crucial for our survival. That dense iron core is what eventually generated Earth's magnetic field. The invisible shield that protects literally all life from deadly solar radiation to this very day. All right, let's look at part three, the origins of life.
Okay, so with a cooled planet, a solid crust, and early oceans formed by trapped water vapor, the stage was finally set for the leading theory of how life began, this epic progression from simple chemistry to complex biology. Phase one here is the primordial soup. Picture early Earth's oceans, just swirling with basic chemicals like carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. This chemical soup was getting constantly zapped by violent lightning storms or blasted by intense UV radiation from the sun. And that extreme spark of energy, that was exactly what was needed to force non-living chemistry to graduate into amino acids, the fundamental building blocks of biology. Pretty wild, right?
Now, before complex DNA or proteins ever entered the picture, the real star of the show was likely RNA. RNA is just an absolute biological marvel because it basically moonlights. On one hand, it acts as a hard drive to store genetic info, but on the other, it acts like an enzyme to catalyze chemical reactions. It's like having a blueprint that can actually build the house itself. These early, self-replicating molecules likely started operating inside tiny fat bubbles known as lipids, ultimately forming the very first rudimentary blueprints of a functioning cell. But there's another crucial piece to this biology puzzle that gives us an alternative, completely sunless location for life's spark: deep-sea hydrothermal vents, way down at the very bottom of the ocean. These vents release incredibly hot, mineral-rich fluids directly into freezing cold seawater. And when that extreme heat slams into the extreme cold, it creates these really powerful chemical gradients. Think of it kind of like a naturally occurring battery. This intense, high-energy environment could have provided the exact steady flow of electrical energy needed to power the very first primitive metabolism.
Which brings us to part 4, the evolutionary timeline.
Stepping back for a second, it's wild to see how this incredible sequence of astrophysics, geology, and biology all builds together over an almost unfathomable scale of time. Let's trace it. 4.6 billion years ago, the solar nebula collapses and the sun is born. Just 100 million years later, which is honestly a blink of an eye in cosmic terms, Earth forms through accretion at 4.5 billion years ago. Fast forward another 100 million years to 4.4 billion years ago, the crust cools down and the very first oceans form. And then, somewhere between 3.5 and 4.1 billion years ago, boom, the very first life appears. In just over a billion years, our cosmic neighborhood went from a collapsing cloud of dead gas to a planet hosting its very first microscopic inhabitants. Those earliest inhabitants, they were called prokaryotes. They were remarkably simple, single-celled organisms, basically like bacteria. And get this, they didn't even need oxygen to survive. But, over time, some of these tiny organisms evolved an incredible trick. They actually learned to use sunlight for energy through photosynthesis. By doing this, they actively pumped oxygen out into the Earth's atmosphere as a byproduct. It was essentially this radical terraforming event. Just a happy evolutionary accident that completely changed the air on our planet, literally paving the way for all the complex oxygen-breathing life we see today.
It's crazy to think about, but every single atom in our bodies and every fundamental building block of our biology was forged in these exact events. From a collapsing nebula, to a molten rock, to amino acids floating in a primordial ocean. But this leaves us with one massive, incredible question to ponder. How exactly did those tiny, simple, oxygen-making cells evolve and combine over the next 3 billion years to ultimately pave the way for human consciousness? Well, that is a whole new mystery to explore next time. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.